Calling the Norton School Committee meeting to order for Wednesday, November 6th. First thing is pledge of allegiance. The flag behind it is what it's called. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Meeting is being recorded by Norton Media and the Norton Public Schools. If anyone else is recording, just let us know. First thing up on the agenda is vote to approve the minutes from October 21st. What's the motion? So, all those in favor? And the next meeting, which was 2 days after, which was the October 23rd. So everyone got a chance to review the minutes.
So I couldn't vote on the 21st.
Yeah, that was one exception. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, for the mini minutes for October 23rd. Right, motion to approve. So
Second.
all those in favor?
Thank you.
Sure, are you good for the warrants? You want?
Yep.
You good? All right, go for it.
I reviewed the following warrants, school expense warrants, October 23rd, 2024, $739,950.98, and school payroll warrants, October 17th, 2024, $1,142,120.56, and which entered them into the record, public record.
Next up, student rep updates.
Good afternoon, everybody. For the LGN, they're holding their annual Booster-thon fun run this Friday, November 8th at the LGN. Our students and their amazing families are so close to reaching our goal of $20,000. The funds raised will go to support learning materials, research supplies, and enrichment. And then from the Yale, last week our Hey PTO with Unlikely Bookstore brought in an author. Who did 2 presentations to our student about his books. Oliver and the Great Big World. Students learned about where Mr. Warner got his ideas, and he wrote his graphic novels. It was an amazing experience for them. As mentioned, last school committee meeting, our students have done a great job with our PBIS expectations of being #respectful, #responsible, and #safe, earning hashtags galore, where we already handed out now close to 150 books for handing in 50 and then 100 hashtags for their second book in book for a coin for the book venue. We have done close to 100 good news calls of the day so far. Our LTT, Lancer Learning Time, RTI, Response to Intervention, block for our IMTSS have been running smoothly since the start of the year, where students are getting the academic support they need each day during the school days as they rotate through different standards and groupings based on their assessment scores. Our faucet of IMTSS, Tier 2 innovations for our students behaviorally have been very successful this year, with our check-in and check-out system of points students have been earning throughout the day. The students on the CI/CO system have been doing so incredibly well. I don't know what any of that means. Explain it. So for the high school, we have a lot of things happening in the next several weeks. The student council is in the process of planning Spirit Week, heading into Thanksgiving. Next Wednesday, over 100 NHS juniors will be inducted into over 10 honor societies. There'll be a powder puff football game, holiday decorating, Spirit Days, and a big competition at the pep rally on Wednesday before Thanksgiving. December, Norton High School will have the upperclassmen semi-formal dance, and the winter concert before the long holiday break. That's all for this thing.
Any questions from students? Next up, opening school remarks. Principal Colbert.
Stand, sit. You can sit. You can present right from there, Mr. Barrett.
I'll use my principal voice. So. Excuse me, I have to put my old man glasses. So I did not prepare slides, just prepared some remarks, so hopefully that's okay. So this is obviously a fresh start this year for JCS. We have a lot of new staff, myself, and so what we're trying to do is bring a lot of new energy to the school while also respecting the traditions that are in place. So there are a lot of really terrific traditions in place here at JCS. I'm excited to share my first opening of school remarks with you as principal. I've enjoyed my first few months being part of the JCS and Greater Norton community. And one of the things I've noticed is how helpful and supportive people have been for me as someone new. And I know you're probably not surprised by that, but it's really nice for me, someone new coming in. So thank you for that. And so even though I'm not a new principal, it's been exciting and a little scary to start my 30th year in education at a brand new school. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to be here in this school. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about things that I think you know, but just to make sure that everybody knows what's been happening. Because of all the hard work of our teachers and staff and the support of our students' families, JCS has gotten off to a great start. Everyone's comfortable with the daily routines and the expectations. And when I stop in and visit classrooms, there's a lot of active learning taking place across all the grade levels, including our little Lancers. Maria Blackburn, who's our new early childhood coordinator, has been an excellent addition to our school, and we're building a really strong leadership team together. So you know, as a school committee, there are a lot of new curriculum initiatives in place at the elementary schools, and teachers are spending a lot of time collaborating within their grade level teams to learn and successfully implement the new ELA program, Interreading. The professional development provided by the district to help teachers get familiar with the new program and the materials has been a really important support for our teachers, and they're looking forward to learning more about how to use the new program as effectively as possible in the next few years. So, for example, I know that Dr. Ackman shares feedback from the PD. The feedback from the PD about Interreading has been consistently extremely positive from teachers, not just at JCS, but the other schools as well. And I think that says quite a bit. My understanding is that the Norton teachers had a key role in evaluating and selecting Interreading, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why, because they have such positive buy-in for the program. I think that's really going to help moving forward. So as you know, too, in the last 3 years, it takes about 3 years at minimum to fully implement a new curricular program effectively. And our school's building on the work that was started last year when Norton adopted Stepping Stones as a new math program and Purposeful People from Character as a social emotional learning program. So teachers have already expressed that they feel much more confident teaching math using Stepping Stones in the second year, which is excellent. And we're also using the lessons and resources within Character Strong across our school community, including in our daily morning announcements that we do with the kids. I shared some of those things with parents in the JCS Journal. And so I think from what I've noticed being new, probably the most significant factor in the success of our students with these programs is the dedication of our teachers and staff. And I've been really impressed with these first students. JCS as a school values a culture that focuses on being kind, being safe, being respectful, being responsible every day. So 3 out of the 4 hashtags match with what you heard from the Yale School. But we still value having fun while we learn together. This is a pre-K through 3 school, right? Kids should have fun sometimes at school. And so one of the ways that we have fun as a community is our students leading the morning announcements every day. If you've been in the school during morning announcements, it's hilarious because we have little Lancers all the way up through 3rd grade doing it. And so they all take different roles and they have a lot of pride doing it. So every day, we say the Pledge of Allegiance together, the students read it, we celebrate birthdays of students and staff, and we share things from Character Strong about what we're working on. We're continuing the JCS tradition of hosting a Veterans Day celebration at the end of this week. And so our student representatives asked what was happening at JCS. They said, I'm going to share that tonight, so I think I'll hold off. We're really excited. 2 students from Norton High School joined us to play the trumpet as part of the ceremony. Many of you, or some of you know, I'm a former music teacher, and my wife is a music teacher, and she's a trumpet player. So this is very exciting for me. And this year, like the past years, we've had members of the Norton VFW joining us. We've also reached out to families this year and invited any family members who are veterans to come and join us. That's something that we did at my prior school. And it was really, really powerful to have kids standing with dad, moms in particular were a huge impact on kids, grandma, grandpa, uncle. So we're looking forward to that this year to recognize our veterans and thank them. My own father was a veteran. Something we've added to the school culture, and for the 3 parents on the school committee, I apologize ahead of time. We've been singing some silly songs together. So being a former music teacher, that's something that
Prior to us
happened.
Yep, that's happened as well.
And that's actually happened. We had one student that moved back to their home sending district because they had a program that could support their needs. And sometimes we have kids that we decide that we're out of district, and that home program was like, you know what, our sending district is like, yep, you're absolutely right. could you please try collaborative? Something collaborative. But they get that bill, and it's, then we try to work collaboratively with them moving forward to try to get the kiddo back into district as soon as possible, or but it's really about building those relationships and that collaboration between us and the sending district and making sure that we're doing what's right for kids and all parties involved, really.
All right, here's the next big, so we figure out that. What happens with this? Can we see students' records before we apply?
No.
We can't.
We cannot. However, we can ask for them after they've been accepted. And basically, any felony charges, we take.
Good.
Jeez.
So if we have
I'm gonna
a,
keep my mouth.
if we have multiple detentions, suspensions, whatever it may be, the applied to come to North, our district has no say to say, no, you cannot come here because your scores are horrible, your behavior's terrible.
So again, it's the same as the voting school, if you really
Yeah,
think of it
right.
that way.
Right.
It's the same process. Right, and that's not, I mean, at least at the high school, there's the majority of it.
Well, and I was gonna say 9 times out of 10, that's not the issue. Like every once in a while, yes, we have that issue. Of
So
course.
piggybacking off of Nick's.
But-
What about like an expulsion? You know that from, or that?
Well, if they've been expelled from somewhere else, we don't.
The 10-year-old got a felony.
No, I'm just, I'm thinking more at the middle school / high school level.
Yeah. No, but if they were expelled, you can only expel a student for a very serious infraction. So therefore, I think with the way that discipline laws go now, it has to be a very, very serious infraction.
How would
So-
you know though?
They would have to share that
Oh, they know
information.
that, okay.
Yep.
So
Sure.
we can still ask for attendance, we can still ask for the IEP, we can still ask for the discipline record, we can still ask home language. Just it has to be after they've been accepted,
So that's the big change. is we were
But they're
getting
still
it up
accepted
front.
though.
which was,
Yeah, it doesn't
we
matter.
weren't supposed to be getting it up front all along.
They were stuck anyway.
But if we were to get that and they were expelled for something, we'd be like, I'm really sorry, we need to rescind your invitation.
Oh, we can do that.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if that's what it
Oh, okay.
is, you just can't say we can't service your special.
Yeah, okay.
Right, so
So if a
Example.
student was expelled, we could rescind their invitation if the reason they was expelled was something that was that significant.
so it's not all justified.
It's really the only reason you can get expelled.
Everything else is gonna try and keep it.
Even so not just a felony, and I said,
Well,
well,
that's
no,
something, it's like-
that's really the only reason you can get expelled. That's just a
You're getting it.
I
Oh,
just,
very different than an all of our basis.
who's in charge, is the Department of DESI in charge of school choice? Like, who sets these rules?
If I had to guess, and
Yes.
I'm going to go out and just give my honest opinion. I think what they're trying to get policy in place is that every student applying for school choice off the bat is
Has an
getting a
equal
clean
opportunity.
slate, which is fine. And then if things come out or things are revealed, then maybe we do have a way to rescind the offer.
And I think it's very important for you guys to know that none of this language is actually changing our policy. The only thing we're actually changing are the dates. Everything else has already existed within the regulations and within our policies. And this, our policies go straight from the Mass State. What unfortunately we were doing is we were collecting information
To make a decision
to
prior.
make a decision prior, which we were not.
And I can
supposed to be
see
doing.
people having a problem.
And I can understand that, right? Like, you know, when you know better, you do better. And so therefore, we're trying to fix the issue of previous cycles.
Number 6, any student who is accepted to the position, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Except if there's a lack of funding for the program. What does that even mean?
I guess if we are really in dire straits and, you know, having another 30 teachers, then we would probably have to have some serious conversation. Although we also have to remember, with those students, we spent $2 million this year. School choice money to balance our budget. So,
I
when the
guess,
school choice students leave, so do the funds.
I mean, you'd almost make the argument that funding a program is basically the sending district issue.
It just makes no sense. If it costs us,
if, for example, Dan, we had to cut another bunch of teachers again next year. And so we are now going from, this is very hypothetical situation. We're going from 7 fifth grade classes down to 5. And we have 15 fifth grade. I don't know if that would be,
yeah, like who, like it's just so
who
vague.
determines?
Who determines
Yes.
what, because like, could we have said hypothetically, we just cut 30 teachers, but my all school choice students were with us?
I think you would have to really be able to defend it. But, and again, the one thing that makes me nervous is the fact that with our school choice students, there goes that funding as well. So I mean,
No, I'm not,
yes,
correct, I'm just saying,
hypothetically. I don't know the answer,
correct,
Right
I
on.
just don't know who,
but there is someone in charge of
Yes.
school choice at Desi.
that
It's lovely.
So is number 5, and 6, I assume, are these like the, school choice policy items from like the state?
Yeah, right. It's all of that is regulatory language.
So does that mean like, except if there's a lack of funding for the school choice program, like if the state decides,
It could be.
sorry, there's
Yeah.
no more school choice, we're
It
not
could be.
we're not giving districts any funding, you know what I mean, like, is that?
Yeah.
can we get clarification on that?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of very important, that if all of a sudden we're staring in a year, 2, 5, 10 years down the road, and we have 200 school choice kids, and all of a sudden we're looking at cutting a ton of teachers, like that might be a legit scenario at some point.
But then our policy would essentially go to, we're not allowing any.
But this says we can, kick the kids out who are here,
Which is awful.
which is awful. I'll be crystal clear, I do not think that should ever happen. I was just always under the impression that the law states that you can't do that, but now I'm reading that you can if you have no funding for the program. No
I will
funding for the program. We don't have any
get some
funding for it.
clarification.
Yeah.
I'll bring it with me when we speak next time. But the language that we're changing,
Sorry.
does, no, it's fine, we could do
No, a lot of
this
these
all,
questions
we could do
are-
this all night. But any questions or concerns about the language we're gonna change, is there anything that you guys would want to see changed for draft 2?
Are you sure you want it to go through June 15th? You don't want that sooner?
I think if we're not making decisions until April or May, I think that 6 weeks is probably fair, that May 1st, and then we can, but I would not go any further past that.
No.
You know, that was, Pam and I kind of came up with that date together, just because it's really Pam that does all of the legwork when it comes to, the application process and all.
And that gives us time to like high school schedule, for example.
High school schedule, placements, all of those things.
As long as you guys feel like that's.
What is it now?
August 15th. It used to be October 1st.
October 1st.
When we first started school choice, it was October 1st. All right, so no vote has to happen on that night. I'll bring it back. I will get clarification for you on what that actually means for funding. And open.
Next up, first reading of public participation at school committee meetings. Dr. O'Neill.
So, this policy here is something that has come in front of the committee before. This was worked on by Dr. Bayetta and our legal counsel, to provide a little bit more of a robust, set of guidelines for public participation at school meetings. Our current policy is very, brief, and they basically saying that they can reach out to the chair if they want to be put on the agenda, but there's really no guidelines around actual public comment. For the last few years, we've followed a pretty, simple process where if there are people in the audience that want to comment on any of the items or have items at the end, usually the chair will give people a couple minutes. I know a few of you have served in that role since we've started it. So this follows the guidelines around public participation. And a lot of it actually does come. So this first paragraph and these first 3 bullet points actually are from our current language. So written correspondence made directed to the committee, 72 hours in advance to have something put on the agenda. and that we can include a public hearing at any time if you so wish. I do recommend keeping those things because it's a good way for people to be able to access the committee, and it also gives them a process of how far in advance we need communication in order for us to perform the agenda. In the middle, that's all pretty similar language there. So then it kind of goes into the role of the chair, and how the chair has oversight over the meeting itself. So this is, I mean, quite honestly, as you can see, it's much more comprehensive than what we currently have. One of the things that we're seeing across the state of Massachusetts is a big pushback in certain communities around public speech. There's a gentleman in Natick that played the ukulele at every meeting for over 2 years. He would make up songs about superintendent and school. So it's having a more comprehensive process in place really only benefits you because it puts the chair in charge of allowing someone to speak or not.
I think kind of going back historically, I think it's number 5 is it has to be something we have control over
Agreed.
in our purview. Like, for example, if someone says my kid got, 20 minutes of recess and they should have had 28, not in our purview. And that should be something, if it's, I have an issue with the way Dr. Reniel spoke to me, possibly in our purview. So I think that was the thing, because we've had people, in meetings that are just, kind of going off the rails a little bit, and it's a directed complaint or personnel issue that, one, we're not going to discuss in a public meeting. It's a personnel matter that's not within our purview, because there's only 4 or 5 positions under our purview. And unfortunately, a lot of the personnel issues start with the building principal, go through the process. And even then, it still doesn't fall under our purview. And that's the critical part of this policy is, I'm all for free speech if it's free speech in a way that you're not just speaking to speak and hear words and spread the word. It has to be something that is relevant to this committee. And we've run
And I think that's really the important part about it, and that's why I like the fact that number 5 is very specific about what purview of the committee is, and that the fact that we will not take, personnel complaints, that this is not the forum for them, and so I think that part, having that really clearly spelled out, is a good thing for all of us. And then the fact that it gives us the time to really kind of adhere to, like, we're going to just do this certain amount of time and that's going to be it. But we can make any changes to this, and what I'll do. So what would happen is that instead of having just kind of things a little bit more willy-nilly, at every meeting we would have a 15-minute public comment period that would be moderated by the chair. And once that is over, public speaks. And that's it. So you guys can do that at the beginning of the meeting, you can do that at the end of the meeting.
Is there,
yeah.
I'm scanning it quickly, I'm missing it. Is the public comment for what is on that current agenda?
So
The public comment be like, last week you guys talked, like, could someone say next week or next meeting, they can come in and say, my public comment is about you guys talking about public comment 2 weeks ago.
yes, they totally.
Because I think that was the other issue, is having something in the literature and policy about it has to be on the current agenda to be discussed in public comment.
Yeah.
That's what we do now.
So this opens it up a little bit more. So this would kind of, if we had a parent that wanted to come in and talk about school choice conversation. Yeah. And say, this has been, the school choice program has been a huge asset to our family. These are the things that we want to share with you. They could do that. They have 3 to 5 minutes. they could share that. Anything that's more lengthy, they would have to, I would say that they put on the agenda. If you choose to speak about it.
And to me, the policy is kind of ambiguous because we're asking them to put it on the agenda, but then they can come in and under public policy and talk about it even though it's not on the agenda.
So don't forget, in public comment, you don't have to respond. And in fact, I often encourage you not to. Just because it doesn't need to be a dialogue. It can be a, thank you very much for sharing. If they wanted something on the agenda, the committee A would need to decide that it's worthwhile to put on the agenda. Just because someone requests it does not mean it has to go on the agenda.
It just seems like a loophole, and I don't like a policy that has to be.
So, as I said, this has come before the committee. This draft has come before the committee previously. Nick and Dan, Dan and Sherry, I think you guys had voted on this one previously. When it comes to the legality around public comment, let me get a little bit more clarification for you, but I think we really are like supposed to have like that public comment time. We could say, I mean, you could do it at the end. Right now, it's suggesting that you do it at the beginning before the items on the agenda. You can always do it at the end.
This is my
And
problem.
people could do it based on items on the agenda.
Because I think, sorry, step on it. I think doing it at the beginning kind of defeats the purpose because they want it, if public comment is truly over after that public comment period, and then have discussion on something on the agenda, then it would make more sense to have. Because otherwise, we wouldn't be allowed public comment based on what was on our agenda,
Mm-hmm.
and then they chose to not follow the rules and have to put on the agenda, then back to square one policy that to me is avoided.
Do we know other districts do? They're more aligned with this than our current.
I looked at a few. Mansfield pretty much has this. Then you do 15 minutes to start. No one's there, you just start. My thing is the history of what we've seen with people coming in. You kind of know that they're coming. If you, it's very rare that we have people come in and say something at the end of our meetings based on some agenda. We kind of know that this is going to be a hot topic. We're going to get people here. To me, is looking at the five of us. We are representatives, whether we, however you want to look at it, elected reps of the residents. So to me, having to go get it on the agenda, make sure we're doing it, to me, it just doesn't, I don't know, to me, it just doesn't flow right. You make people sit around for 2 hours to then, give their 3 minutes of talk. To me, it just doesn't flow. It just seems like we're all doing things and then we're just waiting for the inevitable bomb to blow up. If we started it with okay, hey, we're opening this up. Anything out there? Anyone want to say anything? You go for it. And I do think what I do like about this is me being chair is going to be very different from Dan being chair or whatever. And that gives us the ability to allow the chair to moderate the meeting. That's kind of their job, So I look at it as from standpoint of, there's a few things in here that I would like to take out, to be honest with you, but to give people, we want people to come to these meetings. We want people's voices to be heard. I would much rather have someone come here than to, jump on Facebook or shoot us an email, And another thing, not that this happened, hopefully it never does happen, but how awkward would it be if you wanted to, talk about Jen and how horrible of a job they're doing? Are they really going to reach out to Jen and myself saying that? No. Come here, say it. And then, so, yeah. So there's just certain things to me, it's just I'm all for, if you have an issue, and again, I totally agree with Dan that it has to be within our purview, because if not, this isn't a sounding board either, but I just feel hey, you have something, you want to bring it up and get it off your chest, that's what we're here for. We want to listen, and I think what I've seen in my time here anyway, at least is and even before, is when people talk and they're here, tend to get a pretty good response in terms of we hear you, we understand what's going on. That makes sense. Whether it be, the positions we just put back in. I mean, was anyone thinking about putting teacher learnership positions back in until they came? No, I wasn't, So that's the type of stuff that I feel by doing a public comment right in the beginning, get it out of the way, we can then get you know, them, now they know, hey, it's 6 to 6:15, or, you know, 6 to 6:20 or whatever, and they're out of here. To me, it might open up some doors for us to hear from our community. So that's what we're doing.
I do like that aspect of it. I'm just curious if like, again, there's a hot topic item. So we have the open 15, 20, whatever minutes, people come and talk. And then let's say somebody wanted to talk about MCAS or whatever. Do they get to speak again after we do the MCAS item? Like, are we gonna have like several public?
So my thing is, I think the public comment is directly made full effect. I think if people stay, I'm just gonna say, no, you can't say anything.
No, I
You have the
agree.
chair to
I was
discuss.
I think it's up to the chair.
I
I was
think-
wondering,
Right.
like, I always let people
Yeah.
speak
Yes.
when I was chair, like, if
Correct.
somebody spent the time and was here, I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes say, I always let them.
Right,
because-
yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's up to the chair.
Yeah.
If they speak again in the meeting.
And that, I mean, and that is pretty much in here as well. It's the
Okay.
review of the chair to decide if you want to continue allowing conversation.
Correct. I just think it gives us a little bit more when someone complains or an email or a text message. Hey, we got 15 minutes, we're getting out of our meeting. Come on down.
Yeah, I don't think we wanna be a board that doesn't,
No,
have people come and, cause again, I've said it for a long time, I think when you collaborate with other people and you listen, things can be learned and things can be, changed for the better, so. Yeah,
So I think the one thing that if there is a time limit, that needs to be held in conscience. Because, you know, as you mentioned, you're chair now, someone else will be chair, call it April 15, whatever. But there has to be consistency, because I know like you in the past have said, oh, I'm not gonna time you. That's fine. But if policy says there's a time limit, then we can't have people just, you know, citing the Gettysburg Address for 45 minutes. We can't have, like, I think we can't just have public comment be chaos.
right,
You know, like they can't be like, I hit a pothole, or what about the high school traffic? Which,
but again, that's the chair moderating the meeting now.
Yeah, you're gonna have to.
Right.
and that's my biggest thing is and I don't mean this in a negative way, but like, you can't be for free speech and then tell someone you only get 2 minutes to speak.
Yeah.
But if you're making good points and you're sticking to the topic, and I'm sitting there being like, oh, that's a good point, oh, that's a good point, and you go for 5 minutes, good for you. You're probably gonna lose my attention within 15, 20 seconds, to be completely honest. But like, once you go, like, you're either on the topic and you're making points, or you're not. And that's where the chair can say, okay, we understand your point at this point, we're gonna ask you to, finish up in 30 seconds, So that, I mean, that's kind of how I see it.
I'm just wondering though, like, should there be a line in here that like public comment is for, you come, whatever. But if you want to address a specific agenda item, you would wait until that agenda item. Like, I just want somebody to come in and be like, for the first 15 minutes, and they're gonna talk about agenda item number 4. Like, we're gonna just have that, you know what I mean? Like, I just kind of think that's
Maybe we
great.
could adopt some language.
Something along those lines, just so we're not having a conversation twice, or, like, does that make sense?
Yes,
because I think what you could do it 2 ways, just kind of thinking out loud. If you wanted to start the meeting with public comments, and then at the end, like your last agenda item would be, call it public response to agenda or something like, so they don't have to wait 2 weeks to go to the next meeting to talk about what we just talked about, because public comment.
I mean, right now, like, if we know there's a hot topic, usually there's all of our audience here, and then typically Nick, the chair, will open up and say, all right, who wants to, does anybody want to talk about this while we're on the agenda item? Like, I think that is still appropriate.
Can we, again, just kind of thinking about how this is going to go. Can they identify if they want to speak to an agenda item, and then use it? So say someone came in tonight and said, I want to talk about MCAS recognition, whatever it is. Could we say, all right, your public comment is an agenda item? Because I just don't want to long meeting, because that was by we had some long meetings because we had 30 people showing up, and a lot of it, the problem at the time was it was out of our control, and You know, going back a few years back, state says you're in a mask, you're in a mask. That's where a lot of this came out of. You know, and unfortunately, there's different opinions on that. But again, it wasn't in our purview, but we talk on it. You know, and we have people with scientific experiments, and it delved into a slight bit of chaos at some meetings. The meeting got very long. You know,
Yeah, but a lot of stuff isn't in our purview though, and people I think still have the right to come and talk to us about it though.
no, that's what I'm saying is public comment has to be reserved for things that are in our purview. It can't just be a sound off.
Well, I'm not saying a sound off board, but if it's something relevant to the schools, why wouldn't we allow them to,
Because if we don't have control,
well, the chair will have control over it.
no, I'm saying as a committee, it's not something we control.
So
But
perhaps.
maybe something that we may not be aware of,
Well, in
and
that,
we're hearing about it on Facebook.
here's my other thing, right, and I get the purview, because I totally understand where everyone falls into. But at the end of the day, do you know what the purview is? Money. That's what everything is always going to come down to, and we are the ones to set the price. So when you, like, whoever controls the money is the one who controls the purview. I hate to say it that way, but that's life, that's how it goes. Any company, the CFO is involved in every decision. Why? It's all about money. It's the world we live in, you know? So yes, if they're gonna come and complain about a teacher, we're going to say, that's not on our purview, we're gonna chop that down. But anything else, like you said, we don't want it to be a sounding board, but like at the same point, we might not know.
Right.
If something's
Yeah,
going
like,
on in
there's
the
certain
schools.
things in here about personnel that's specified that can't happen.
Right, exactly,
Right.
exactly.
So I would rather hear it here than on Facebook. I agree. Or social
Always.
media, that's all I'm saying.
If they're coming here, they care about
Right,
it. If they're typing behind their keyboard, yeah, they might care about it a little bit, but they don't care about it enough to put their face in a public.
We could put something about the meeting. So is there stuff you guys want taken out of this before the second reading?
Me, I would cut anything that has anything to do with time, and I would cut anything about 15 minutes. We have a very hot button topic. I would not be comfortable as chair saying, we got to 15 minutes, sorry, we're cutting all of the opinion.
But unfortunately, you're not saying this meeting, but you're only the chair for as long as you're the chair. The next chair might say, I want it to be 15 minutes. So I think we have to have language because Nick Schleicher's not chair of the ages. So I mean, but we can't always keep coming back to policy for each chair's discretion.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
I think you just keep it 15 minutes and then you have whoever the current chair is has the right to allow more.
yeah, so it actually does say that,
Maybe we just.
number 6, however, the chair and his or her sole discretion may grant extensions of time in extenuating circumstances. So that's there in
But that's
number
around,
6.
but that's around the 3 minutes.
That's okay.
Okay.
But I mean, still, regardless, I think we need to have a time there because if you don't have, like, we're gonna do this for 15 minutes, then we're gonna, like, our meetings are gonna be.
So, but that's what we signed up for.
No, we didn't. As elected officials, we're not 4-hour meetings because people will talk about things that aren't within the purview of the school committee. If someone wants to complain about a pothole in the school.
But Dan, at what point, but let's go perfect, right? Let's just say everyone's mad at Jeff. We have 40 people coming.
That's an executive session. Like, that's personnel.
But I'm gonna,
I mean, really.
Why don't we just leave it to 15 minutes and the chair has the right to allow extra comment? I don't understand that. Right.
no, that's, yeah, I just don't.
Yeah, so
see
it
where that
is there in number 6, it's the second sentence. However,
No, it should be in number 2. Right? During a 15-minute public comment period. Under the discretion of the chair.
so it is there in number 6, so it can apply. We need the other part. Unless the chair determines that there is good reason for rearranging the order at a public meeting. Yeah, I mean, we can just take the sentence from number 6 and put it in number 2.
Have it
Yeah.
both, I guess.
Yeah, that was actually one of my suggestions. It's like, could we take 2 and 6 and kind of combine?
Yeah.
So that way, kind of all the time is in one.
I mean, it's-
Yes, time out.
Anything else that you guys want me to change for the next time? Again, we don't have to vote on this one tonight. I will bring it back, whatever we do again.
I feel like we should have invited Dinesh for the next one.
It's his favorite topic.
Yes.
Favorite topic.
I know, Dr. Ackerman was a little bit anxious about presenting this to you guys the day after the big vote.
It's true, we were talking today, I'm like, just our luck, right? So it's a student achievement report, it's the MCAS report, and here it is, it's gonna be removed, so. Interesting timing, so I wanna start by saying, whoever you watched last night on the election, watching all the big board and the screens back and forth, whether it's Bill Hemmers, Steve Kornacki, or John King, I'm not close.
I was gonna say-
So I just wanna,
Pay no attention to the man in front of the board.
I just wanna lower a little expectations in terms of my skill, but all kidding aside, I just wanna step in and kind of reframe, this is my second year here in Norton. And I know that their MCAS conversation has been kind of a long-standing issue. And I know some people really value it, other people really don't. And I respect all positions. The one thing I just want to say with regard to MCAS is it is helpful for us because it is a common universal tool so that we can look at how we're doing and crosswalk that with other districts. So I position all of this by saying this is one point in a much larger context. We're not defined by MCAS in any way. Mr. Barrett, student representatives talk all the time about the quality and the care that our school offers, and that's hugely important. This is one small piece, but important piece of seeing that puzzle come together. So, a little bit of a history lesson. We had the early MCAS, it's known as PARC. Then we had the legacy scores, and then all the metrics changed in like 2018 because the test became more difficult. To bring us back into focus, we then had 3 years with kind of a different cadence between going through 2019 to 2021, full tests, no tests, half tests, trying to make heads or tails of that data longitudinally. I'm not sure how helpful that is. So the real focus, and the preface for the presentation tonight is, we actually now have 3 years of consistent administration in a consistent format. So it gives us a little bit of an opportunity to look longitudinally at how we're doing. I think as importantly, all the work we've done on curriculum adoption, and that's academic. So recall, when we began, just as recently as a couple of years ago, we did not have what would be considered like high quality evidence-based instructional materials in a number of areas. But between 2022 and 2024, we've onboarded Stepping Stones, Mid-School Math, Amplify ELA, Character Strong, and we're beginning Navigate 360 in the high school this year, which is social emotional curriculum. And additionally, this has all been foundationally guided by our work around IMTSS. And I want to make sure that in the context of all the work that we do, just examine that this is one part of, or one scope of a more comprehensive view. And so IMTSS is still about on-time interventions based on student needs, that we're finding dedicated times in schools. We're trying to use the best data and be most consistent and make sure that our PD programs really match the curriculum adoptions that we've done. And I feel like as a collective that we've really involved all of our staff, so our teachers, our administrators, our central office folks, to try and really make this both a bit of bottom up and a bit of top down, so that we all kind of come to consensus on those best pieces. So I'm gonna walk us through some kind of familiar slides that those of you that have been on the committee have seen before. And then for the folks that are a little bit newer, I'm gonna take a slightly different tack for the second part, because I think it's interesting and helpful data to look at longitudinal pieces as well. So I want to start with really like what they call that 30,000 foot view, and then work into some of our grade level cohorts. And then I really want to end this with talking about student growth, because that's often something that may not get the attention that it deserves. So we've all been in the airplane, we're looking down, we're seeing what's below us. So the first several slides are going to be, I think, largely familiar, but these are kind of big picture snapshots in time. So can everybody read this reasonably well or see it on your screen? So we really want to focus our efforts and see these blue and green bars be as high as possible. And one way to really capture how we're doing is to take the combined exceeding expectations and meeting expectations bar and combine them. And the more weight we have on that left-hand side, the better that we're doing. So if we look at our last year's grade 10 cohort in English language arts, if you combine the if you combine the meeting and exceeding, we're at 56%. That is just 1 point under the state average, 57. Is the state the best comparison for us? No, because it's so diverse, but it does give us a broad base of, in the big picture, where are we lining up with our other districts in the state?
So Brian, not that we have it here, but maybe you have this. Can you look at the data set as a whole, look at like districts? Like
Yes.
say, I know historically we compare ourselves to like our TBL companions.
Yes.
Because that's kind of like, and we always say like, we're not gonna compare ourselves to Attleboro, Taunton, Mansfield, because they're so
And this
bigger.
is, we can, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So there's a metric called the dark districts, which are by DESE's comparisons from a socioeconomic status, from a demographic status, from a size status that look similar to us. Is it a perfect match? No. But it is one baseline for us to compare ourselves over time to other districts.
I just think we always do ourselves a disservice looking at what the state is versus us, because it's apples to oranges.
I agree. It's a very narrow, it's a narrow measure, and I feel like it's an excellent starting point and something that maybe could elicit some more conversation and kind of win more on that data that we find really important. And similarly, when we look at math, again, Norton last year, grade 10 mathematics, 48% meeting or exceeding, 48% versus the state. So squarely in the big picture sense, right at about those state averages. Moving into science, technology, education. If you look at grade 10, our district meeting and exceeding 52, the state was 49. So just a tick above where the state is for the grade 10 STE. Then looking at the broad band of grades 3 to 8 ELA. So again, Norton was meeting or exceeding, and this is combined grades 3 all the way through 8, 40% meeting or exceeding, and that's just above the 39% state average. Again, these aren't scores that we don't want to improve. We most certainly do, but they kind of start as a broad basis of comparison. And then if we want to look at grades 3 to 8 math, Norton is 40% meeting or exceeding combined, and then the state is 41% meeting or exceeding. So again, very similar picture in Norton than what we see across the country. one way to look at growth and to look at student progress is to look at something called cohort data. And a cohort basically means if we were to follow a group of grade 3 students in 2022, then grade 4 students in 2023, and grade 5 students in 2024, it gives us a little perspective of how they grow over time. I want to offer, as a preface to this, we have a number of new curriculum endeavors, which is wonderful. One of the things that happens, particularly for a test like MCAS, which measures a very long window of instruction, you may see a little lag at the beginning, and that's okay. Typically, and Mr. Barrett had referenced this earlier, it's a 2 to 3 year period so that you get comfortable with the program, you get comfortable with the methodology, especially if what the new program is substantially different than what you had in the past. And that really is, it's okay. So we want to kind of dive into that. So I have a few slides, elementary, and elementary to middle, and then middle and middle to secondary, just to give us some grade bands to look at for this age. So if you look at our grade, our elementary cohort data, for MCAS, as I referenced earlier, there are those 4 categories. So if you look at our ELA cohort data from grade 3 in 2022 to grade 5 in 2024, those meeting and exceeding scores are down a little bit over time. And those generally, we have more students moving into the partially met category, and then really very slight change in the not met category. So again, curriculum adoptions tend to be a lagging indicator, but slight downward trend over these 2 years. Then again, looking at the math scores as well, if you look at the 3-year cohort from grade 3 and 22 through grade 5 and 24, we've had a bit of a dip.
Brian, do you mind if I interrupt? So my immediate first thought when I looked at this data, and I was like, oh, well, my immediate first thought was, oh God. But then my second thought was really around foundational skills for kids coming out of lower elementary and into that upper elementary. And it made me think about, okay, is this an issue of students not necessarily mastering some of those foundational skills before they reached upper elementary, and now therefore we have this bigger gap of where students are lagging behind? And it made me think a lot about our IMTSS process and, thinking about who are these kiddos? Who are these kiddos that are seeing dips in their performance? They were doing well enough to meet the standard or exceed the standard when it came to 3rd grade. But the work is getting harder. It's, they need to put a little bit more into it. What skills are they lacking, right? Because I think, especially when I think about this particular cohort, so, and I say this because this is my son's cohort, these are our current 6th graders, so they were 1st graders in March of 2020 when everything closed. And if you weren't a reader in March of 2020, when the doors closed, you probably were not going to be a reader until the end of 2nd grade, if not the beginning of 3rd grade, because we were doing so much online learning for that cohort of students. And 1st grade is such a critical time for students in mastering those foundational skills. So this makes me want to really, and I get jealous of Dr. Ackerman because he gets to do the fun stuff that I love, and I get to deal with craziness sometimes. But it makes me want to dive in and look at student-specific data, and then it also makes me want to look at standard-specific data. So where were kids doing well in 3rd grade? What were the specific standards? And where are they now falling apart? And are those 2 things connected? Because I would put some money on it that I bet they are. And so that's what these things make me think about, like from using my teaching and learning hat. But it's discouraging to see that dip, right, from 3rd grade to 5th grade, because our hope is that as they get older and as they move through, they're going to get more skills and more work. And I think about that a lot with these kiddos.
Do you ever think our district is a little different because of that is its unknown, it's a whole different experience that they go through so much?
We've historically talked about that
Yeah.
because,
Funny you ask.
and that's why I was saying earlier in my comment with Merritt is that, like, when, and Sherry can probably attest to this too, is like, when we used to look at LG and JCS, they're completely different things, you know, and I say that meaning, it's almost like, you know, LG's off on its island, JCS has its little island, everything else is in the middle that seems to be a little more decent, but
But it's also just a transition.
Yeah.
Kids coming to school, they're in and they're out. It's
So
they're
it's-
learning a whole new thing, and then they're throwing all this on them too. It's a lot.
Historically, if you look at data trends, and I've been doing this as far as I've left for a long time, you always see a big dip in grade 4, and then you start to see it climb back up in grade every single year, without fail. So I don't know if it's a transition year. The 4th grade test, many years ago, used to have a really significant writing portion that went along with it, which I always felt was a big factor for students because all of a sudden they have to write this 5-paragraph essay that has to be cohesive, it has to have proper mechanics, you have to use evidence from the text. It was a big ask for 4th graders. So I always used to blame, like, or say that probably be a factor of it. But I do think it's a transition for kids.
And I know as well, I had a nice conversation with Mrs. Dietz today, who's our math interventionist. You know, as Jen talked about the kids that were not readers when COVID hit, similarly, the sophistication of math problem solving and the
Number
idea,
sense?
and the idea of having to go through multi-step processes to come, it's something that just for a lot of our kiddos just didn't crystallize at that time. So that is going to lag a little bit. We are, and we'll see in some future slides, our SGP rates are, are decent. But I think that's something that's just we're going to have to be patient with all that coming back. I have every confidence we'll get there because, again, the foundational pieces of curriculum, professional development are there. It just will take us a little bit of time to help recoup that loss because those kids, missed 250 days of in-person instruction.
so,
I'm curious with stepping stones, and the way that I understand it is that it has this kind of like spiral, like
Yes.
scaffolding, right? Piece, and I see it in the sheets that I get home with my son. When a student, when you increase to the next grade, is the teacher sort of like doing this kind of initial assessment, if you will, of like, here, this is where we're at. Oh, it looks like they've sort of missed some of these pieces from, let's say, second to
Yes.
third, whatever. We need to fill that in before we can like push on in the curriculum.
We say universally to our teachers, as a starting point, we have to meet our students where they are.
Right.
And we start from there and inform our instruction based upon, because we are trying to be data driven, looking at those assessment pieces, and then during intervention blocks or small group times, trying to then fill those gaps with individual or small groups of students.
Sorry, so every fall, every student takes the STAR assessment for reading and math. But there are assessments also built into stepping stones. Like there's an end of the year benchmark, there's also a beginning of the year
I'll just say, wasn't that,
quarterly.
correct me if I'm wrong, that was one of the big selling points
Yes.
for that curriculum, was because of the end of the year and then the teacher needed to kind of figure out like, all right, hey, 80% of this went well, we need to look at this a little bit more going into third grade. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember that kind of thing.
so when we look at, I know we've had some curriculum changes the last couple of years. When we look at curriculum, we also comparing that to the MCAS subjects, because I just don't like. Part of me is like, you always hear they're teaching to test. Well, yeah, because that's our benchmark. But when we look at curriculum, do we make sure that those MCAS subjects are in that curriculum?
We do. So in order to be rated as high quality on Curator Ed reports, all of our curriculum materials have to cover all content standards. And those content standards on the MCAS match the content standards that we deliver via our instructional materials. So a vendor, a Stepping Stones, and Into Reading wouldn't even be a consideration if they did not comprehensively teach those standards. So the elementary was a little bit mixed. We do have some positive changes for our middle school, because one way we wanted to look at this data was then to say, if you look at some elementary folks, like grade 4 and 22, and then moving to grade 5 and 23, and then looking at that first middle school year experience in ELA, here was another basis of comparison. So that we can see that the number of students in that meet or exceed category ticked up nicely. We had 9% growth in that area. And I think that's helpful, and I think that bodes well. One thing to think about, and this is an initial point, and it will have to be fleshed out over time, those students in 23 and grade 5 did not have, they used the old Lucy Parkins units of study, but then in grade 6 had amplified ELA. How much impact it has, we won't know. It's like, it will just take a little bit of time, but that is something that gives us a nice positive data. If you look at the elementary to middle school math cohort, again, similar. In the aggregate, the combined scores from grades 4 through 6, from 22 to 24, we saw a 9% growth in that meeting and exceeding category. So again, grade 5 in 23 used our old program, but grade 6 in 2024 used our mid-school math program. So again, is it causal? We don't know, but at least it's an initial data point to give us some information. And then if we want to look at that ELA cohort data, again, starting with grade 6 in 22, so these are students that have been in the middle school for 3 years, over a 3-year period, having the same test each year. Again, very, nice growth over that period. So if you look specifically, those students in grade 7 did not have amplified ELA, but they did in grade 8 in 2024. So you see some nice jumps from the exceeded and met categories from 23, moving into those exceeded and met categories in 24. So again, an initial data point, but showing some reasonable growth. Similarly, we wanted to look at the middle school math cohort data, and this wasn't as positive as the ELA cohort data. But again, if you're looking at grade 7, those students did not have mid-school math in 2023, and did not have mid-school math, did have mid-school math in 2024. We did actually see a dip. Again, if you're noticing a trend here, it's that it's a little bit variable, right? In some areas it's gone up, in other areas it's gone down. So we're going to continue to do what we've done with curriculum and professional development and building capacity to really continue to move those schools forward. The last cohort I wanted to look at, and this is a little bit of a different cohort, because I think, as Dr. O'Neill had stated earlier, for MCAS for ELA, students will take it in 8th grade, but then they do not take it typically in 9th grade, and then again they take it in grade 10. So you'll notice here, if there's a jump from 22 to 24, that would be the reason. And again, we could talk a lot about the reasons behind it: MCAS graduation requirement, expectation. I don't know if that's part of it or not, some very strong growth from those grade 8 students in 22 to grade 10 students in 2020. Similarly in math, looking at that cohort data, grade 8 in 2022 versus grade 10 in 2024, we've seen some nice positive change, up to a total of 8 points in that meet and exceeded category.
So this is probably a silly question, but I'll ask it. When it comes to MCAS testing, is there like study guide or review period that the students go through? Because I remember, like, again, I never took MCAS, but like, you had a study guide for SATs, you had a study guide for PSATs. At least kind of, is it more just, or is the review as simple as these are the type of questions you're going to see, but they don't go over like the content?
So they actually, MCAS has what's called a released items effect. And so they're test items, actual test questions from previous years. So it could be a compare and contrast essay. It could be, solving a linear equation. Whether or not that appears on the following year's test, we don't know. But those are available, and I know at the middle school, they definitely intentionally practice those. I was able to see grade 7 last year. They did an MCAS ramp up, and they combined it with cornhole and basketball to like make it fun and interactive. So people definitely do practice them. I know in visiting classrooms, particularly the upper elementary grades, I will often see, for instance, 5th graders working on that 5-paragraph essay that we have referenced earlier. So, yes.
And because it's a computer-based test now, it's just not multiple choice like the way they used to be. So there is a practice test that kids can take on their Chromebooks that will show them what the questions look like and help them kind of practice how to use the tools, how to move things from one category to another. It's very, very different than just picking up the help.
It's well beyond the Scantron sheets and blue books that I grew up with. So the final thing I wanted to look at is student growth percentage or percentile. So simply put, every student or cohort group is assigned an SGP number between 1 and 99. 1 means that that student scored at or better than 1% of their peers. 99 meant that that student or cohort group scored better than 99% of their peers. Why do we look at student growth? Because if Mr. Barrett on the 24 MCAS scored in the exceeded category and I scored in the not met category, examining our scores as a basis of comparison isn't really that helpful. But if Mr. Barrett and Mrs. Russo also scored in the exceeding category in 2023 and then took it in 2024, we would want to compare their scores because it's a more accurate barometer of how much progress is made. And typically, we should expect about 1 year of growth for every student every year. And so what you'll find is the numbers range from, as I said, 1 to 99. 50 is right in the middle. If you are within the band of the 35th to the 65th percentile, that is within the typical range. Below the 35th is considered low growth. Above the 65th is considered high growth. So we always aspire, especially in light of all the earlier conversation, of having the highest growth percentile. So I just wanted to take a look and share with the committee just what some of the SGP has looked like over the last couple of years. So if we look at the grade 8 ELA SGP, the mean SGP has been hovering right around 50%. We ticked just above that the last couple of years. And so that squarely represents typical growth for that 8th grade cohort. The math SGP, again, right around the 50th percentile, has kind of stayed in those 40s. But again, it's squarely within that typical growth range.
Just a point of clarification, so on 2022, that was the 8th grade cohort,
Yes.
6th grade.
So that was the 8th grade, it was that year's 8th graders.
So we're not looking at cohort
those-
data anymore.
Excuse me, sorry, thank you. Yes, and then,
So this is those 186 kids,
Yeah.
or 166 kids, whatever I can see.
and I wanted to include the number of students because
Correct.
you have some variance in, the fewer students you have, the greater the variability with school changes. And then kind of the last was, again, SGP, that would be grade 10. This has been fairly solid. We were above the 50th at 55 for 22 and 23. Took a little dip below in 2024. But in all of those areas, you see that our student cohorts are making what are considered to be typical. We aspire for higher, but we're currently within that typical average. Similarly for math, we look at the cohort for math, 39th percentile, which is on the cusp of low growth, but some nice bounce back. 51 SGP in 2023, and then 57 last year, which is solid. So I just wanted to take the last couple of minutes because I think we need to celebrate the things that we've done well, and a lot of people at all levels of our schools, our teachers, our principals have worked really hard. And we were dealt a tough hand with COVID. That was a very difficult time. So I want to acknowledge the work that faculties have put in to really help us. We really saw that solid growth from that math and ELA, that elementary to middle cohort. We saw some really solid growth with that 3-year ELA cohort, and then that strong growth from grade 8 and 22 to grade 10 and 24. These are not in your slides, but I also wanted to reference, Jen and I were talking about data and doing some data analysis. If when I went back and looked at the item analysis, we overperformed the state averages pretty consistently in almost all grades 3, 4, and 5 writing questions. So that was a nice thread to tie together that saw Norton perform well. And then similarly, when I look at the geometry clusters in grades 3, 4, and 5, Norton students perform at or above consistently through those grade years. And so, obviously, we have areas of growth. The elementary math and the ELA cohort, we had that little bit of a dip, a little bit of a decline in the middle school math cohort, and the SGP scores right across grade 8 and 10 are right about an average of 50. That's okay, but we always want to shoot for high. So we're proactive. We're always thinking about this. All of our work is grounded in continuously supporting our students academically, behaviorally, and social, emotionally. We always focus on the whole student. We want to continue. We've had a real rigorous, intensive professional development process with our instructional materials, and we want to continue that. It's very important. We have an ongoing and consistent professional learning cycle opportunity. So, as an example, we onboarded into reading in August. We had our teachers do a 6-week interval of instruction. On that October 25th day, vendor, Dr. Marianne Perry, spent the day with us in the district. So we went into classrooms, we saw good things. Then the afternoon was all breakout groups with all the educators teaching to read. We did the same with Amplify ELA. and the same with Stepping Stones Math. We have contracted again to do a third round, so we can continuously grow and evolve in January. And I budgeted through our ESSA grant, as much, not as much, but I tried to build a nice cushion because this is a hugely important piece so that we can continue to build that bridge. Something that's going to be coming soon, and Jen had referenced this a little bit earlier, we are going to continue to crosswalk our STAR data and our MCAS data to help us make decisions, to help look at those specific standards and look at areas for growth to support our teachers and to look at instructionally. We started a lot of that work over last summer. We had our leadership team analyze data, and we're going to continue to do that as a group and then continue to bring that to our educators. And of course, the pool isn't as deep as it's been, but we will continue to flesh out the opportunities.
Thanks, Jeff.
I know a lot of information was just not thrown at you, it's the wrong term, but if you're looking at 20 graphs and 25-minute presentation, if you have questions, if you want more information, conversation, like please know individually or as a group, I would welcome that. I know there's a lot of verbiage in here that isn't familiar if you don't deal with it all the time. But I would want to, make myself available to anybody if you were interested in talking about it. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
We're talking to Brian about MCAS.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
I had a question. I was just curious, you mentioned here, like, you looked at the geometry questions and the writing items. Were there any particular items or clusters that you saw where you were like, ooh, we tanked on these?
We were fairly consistent. There wasn't an outlier where we were demonstrably below. Not to overly geek out on it, but
Yeah, well, yeah.
if you go,
That's the preface, we know
Right,
exactly.
if you go into Edwin Analytics, which is one of the tools that we use, they do a double line graph. So they will track each question individually. They'll have the correct state response rate in red. Then they will have the correct Norton response rate in blue. And so you can actually go through item by item and look at what the results are. We did not have anything that, like, on a quick visual stood out as being, oh my goodness, no. We were pretty consistent in terms of where we were.
I got a few questions. One, so when we look at this, and kids who are partially meeting expectations, what does partially meeting expectations actually mean?
So it means that they have acquired some of the grade level standards that are necessary, but that there are other standards that they have not done. So one of the benefits of being in Massachusetts is that our state standards are the highest. So it is a rigorous test.
So now to go through, obviously, now this is going to change, but our grade 10 kids, for those students who are not meeting expectations, partially meeting expectations, does that mean they can graduate, or does that mean they have to do additional things, retest?
Retakes.
It is,
Yes.
So the actual scaled score for passing in grade 10 is in the partially meeting range. Students that do not reach that passing score, for lack of better words, have multiple opportunities to take retakes because this
Just
assessment
that section,
happens.
right?
I'm sorry?
Just on that section. They don't take all of it.
No, they would just take ELA or they would just take math. But there are also, Vinny could probably Sorry, Benny. To probably give you a little bit of info, we also have what's called a competency determination for students that have a difficult time passing the tests. We know not all students are great test takers.
So we did do that for, I don't remember the numbers, I have to get back to
I think it was
it.
10.
Yeah, a few kids, especially in the math area.
Yeah.
We had one particular teacher who really, we took those kids in, they had a dedicated block. It was additional, for some of them, it was an additional math block, for example. And they did the competency.
Portfolio. It's a portfolio,
It's like a
isn't it?
portfolio. Kind of like, I know you've heard about special education portfolios, so they're different in terms of, pass, but for these kids, you can actually pass.
And is it unlimited opportunities for access, or is it really like, for example, I know my daughter took a by literacy.
Yep.
test.
So,
She had multiple opportunities. So is it?
Until
or
time
do we-
runs out.
Yes.
Well, I guess my question is, do we intervene, or do we say, take another test and really kind of like reconsider it, or do we say,
No, we
let's work
intervene
with you a little bit, and then you.
now that we have interventions.
Just take it again.
At first, for a while, we didn't have any interventions. And now we have interventions. So we do intervene like that, extra math class that.
So, for example, our third grader comes in, gets partially meeting expectations. What do we do in that regard? I guess,
Parent or us as a district?
no, sorry, us as a district, not us. I'm waiting on you.
You're like, I'm not.
So like that, so that third grade student, let's say they finish at JCS or finish at LG, they will go to grade 4 at Henry A. Young. And so those teachers will have that information. What currently goes on at Yale right now is, this Benson referenced this earlier, they have the IMTSS or RTI block. So those students are broken up by skill with teachers to work on specific gaps that they may have. It could come directly from MCAS. It could be from a different area, but that's part of what we're trying to really evolve with IMTSS and with our culture around data, to really have that pinpointed level of, if I need help on numbers and operations in base 10, I know that I can get it.
And it's also important for us to remember that that particular third grader that did not do well in some particular strands, that's one opportunity for them to show what they're learning, right? They, perhaps are working with the teacher and really getting those geometry skills on a day-to-day basis. And we're like, oh, maybe that was a bad day for them. Or maybe the question was worded weirdly or something along those lines too. If they can consistently show you that they have mastery.
And like, I guess that, for lack of a better word, when we see those third grade tests, we obviously have a start test, we have what you were doing in the classroom. So
Yes.
do we kind of triage
Yes.
to be like, wait a
Yes.
second, here, this is we're not just, saying, hey, this kid, whoa, dude, that's, we gotta put him here. It's more of like, all right, hold on, this might have been bad.
Yes.
Here's
Well,
this.
because we don't have the resources
Right,
to do that with
right,
every kid. I mean, ultimately.
Right,
So I mean, we have to use other data points to kind of like narrow your field.
Yes.
And especially in third grade, it's the first time they've seen this assessment.
Yes.
It's super overwhelming for kids.
So,
One of the things that's nice about the parent report is you get a parent report and it's like almost like a little booklet. It's 4 pages and it will tell you your child's ELA score, where they fell in that range. And then it will show you every single question that was part of the ELA assessment and the standard that it aligned with, and it will show you the ones that your child got wrong. So we have that same information as educators. So we can say, okay, Jen didn't do well in these particular ELA standards. So it gives you a little bit of a clearer picture, and parents can see that too, which is
Now,
it's extremely
Well,
helpful,
I guess,
even for people who know what it is.
so like, let's just hypothetically kind of attack that to the third grade. Yeah, some third grade can be used for this math. But can we look at it, like when you see those questions, do we have like a snapshot of what district did on question 5?
yes.
Yes.
So you can kind of see like 5, 6, 7, 8, all right, we are struggling in comprehension. We need a, okay,
Yes.
so it breaks it down very,
It does, and like that double line graph that Justina had asked earlier is so helpful, because then you can actually go on the line see what the question is, and then crosswalk it, you can actually see what that standard was.
And that's actually exactly how the Yale School is doing their mental learning time. Like they use the MCAS data and they say, okay, for this fourth grade group, where did they have a lot of trouble? And then they also use STAR data to do the same thing. And they'll say, okay, this, for these next couple intervention cycles, we're going to work on these three things. So they're using all of that data and they do a really nice job. They've kind of been they've been moving with that for a little bit longer.
Go back to grade 10. So ELA in grade 10 this past year, we had, between partially meeting and not meeting, we had 44% of our students. How many students have we not graduated in the last 5 years? Do we have is it zero
From MCAS or?
from MCAS?
And both.
In the last 5 years, I would say only a handful.
I mean,
I would say that the high school does an incredible job of working with students to figure out the competency determination for kids that have a difficult time passing. I can only think two off the top of my head, but you know better than I do, so.
And then so again, these come out kind of like now.
Yeah.
So a kid who wasn't meeting or didn't pass, if you will, didn't pass the test now. Now with the new determination, the law of not being the graduation requirement, does that take effect this upcoming year?
It does not.
We have no information yet in terms of when it will, but we do know that any of our current seniors still have to meet that determination for graduation at this time.
The guidance that came out today said no earlier than December.
Of this year. No earlier than December 5th of this year, but they still said this graduating class will have to meet the competency determination. Right?
So the class who just took the MCAS,
Our,
correct, the juniors now.
Yeah.
The juniors now we have no idea.
we don't.
More likely than
Are you
not.
that
going
surprised
to
that
have
Nessie
to pass.
doesn't have?
I mean,
This is the issue when it comes to ballot questions, is they're very, if
Nobody
something
votes.
passes, they're very reactive to us. Like, there's no plan in place.
there's no legwork
If-
ahead of time.
Yeah, because the purpose of a ballot question is an outside group or entity can do the work and get it placed on the ballot.
And ultimately, I think there's a lot of people that misunderstood part of the ballot question. MCAS does not go away. We are still required by law to administer MCAS. There is no opt-out for students. Students are required to take it. We are required to put the test in front of them. The vote that took place last night is only for the graduation. But the actual MCAS is part of a federal regulation, and No Child Left Behind, that we have to have a state system.
And then, okay, so
I just wrote.
So, my fear, about not
Just
being,
one?
just one, that of not being a graduation requirement.
Yeah.
How is us, how are we going to make sure that our kids aren't just coming in and going, check, check, check?
So I have significant concerns about that, and that was part of the reason that I think I was not in favor of this ballot question, because there wasn't a plan. Right now, MCAS has huge amount to do with accountability systems for schools and districts. Those accountability systems are published. Realtors use them to market communities, to sell homes. We are put up against, and that's how they decide which schools and districts need support from the Department of Education and which are commendation schools. You take away the accountability piece of students needing to pass it, and we always tell kids it's great practice for you, but it's really about us and how we're doing, right? Like, you guys don't have to worry until you get to high school. But ultimately, we're going to be judged on something that everyone is told it doesn't.
Well, then I guess from administration standpoint, is how do we also keep our teachers? That's a whole other aspect of this as well, to make sure that this is relaying from the teachers to the students that this is still important.
And I think the best thing that we can do, our job as educators are to deliver standards and skills. MCAS is meant to measure the acquisition of those skills. So from a teaching and learning standpoint, I know the term teaching to the test has always been a popular one, but we really don't do that. We really teach the standards, and the assessment just measures the acquisition of those standards. So from my perspective, we still have content standards to deliver, whether it's 10th grade geometry or it's 3rd grade multiplication, it's still the same thing.
Well, that's the thing, just on the side, yeah, the other side of that is every grade up to high school, they've had that impression for all these years. High school. There's still, those grades didn't have an end result to take that test, whereas a high school sophomore has to.
And I feel like we always give our MCAS presentation in this room. I feel like I've given my MCAS presentation in this room 100 times. And that's why I've always stood here and say, we can say it's not the only thing. We can't say it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because ultimately, it does matter from our perspective in terms of, you know, the hoops that we have to jump through. And also, it's a relevant data point to see how we're comparing with others.
So, kudos to Brian here too, I think, because from 2.5 years down, we've definitely gotten more data driven, I think, from a standpoint of like, hey, this is what we're looking for. And I think the committee's going to make that a priority to a certain degree. What are we looking at? Did we do something very similar to this from our STAR reports, from any other type of assessments that we do over the grade levels?
So like, MCAS is dense. STAR, believe it or not, is even more dense with the kind of data that you can pull. So we could certainly look at, like if we wanted to look at it from a progress rate, that would be a logical first step. We can do it from a standards acquisition lens. So the work that we did as cohort last summer is we looked at the end of year state standards acquisition summary report so that we could measure an entire year's interval, teaching and learning, and then put ourselves in the position of, if that data is from grade 2, and I am the incoming grade 3 teachers, we actually model this together. What do my instructional groups look like? What standards did we identify as those first touch points for students? So the answer is yes, we can do a lot of things with STAR as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see, because again, I think Jen just said perfectly, but the MCAS isn't the end all be all. But like from my standpoint that I've always seen is like, this is the only kind of data we get to see, you know? We don't see student growth. You know, we obviously get to see, you know, perfect scores and stuff like that, but in order to actually see it, to see, hey, where are our gaps? You know, where are we doing really well? How can we do this better? If we can get something similar to this presentation, whether it be STAR, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of other assessments that would probably go off as well. I think anything that we can get into our hands, even if we, you know, shorten it down to 5 or 6 slides of like, hey, here's some growth, here's what's going on here. I think that's going to be huge for us in terms of, you know, ultimately it's our student success. You know, what is going really well, what is going, you know, where do we need to grow? And it gives us the ability to say, hey, wait a second, that curriculum is working. Let's keep rolling with it, you know, in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years,
And our vendor for STAR, they're called Renaissance. They have a whole analytics platform. At times it's a little bit funky, but you can actually pull a lot of really good longitudinal data from it as well and track, you know, schools even over time.
Correct. And I think to Audrey's point, like that getting extra data from the 4th grade, we might be able to kind of start, not by putting a finger on it or pinpointing it, but we might be able to start saying, hey, wait a second, here are our gaps. You know, this is what we need to work on from the foundational learning standpoint. This is where we're falling short. We're seeing it in 4th grade because it doesn't change, blah, 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 whatever. But I feel like the more things we can get, you know, from data, what our kids are doing, I think is very, very. Anything else? Good. Next, last one. Other business, anything else to bring up?
Stuff. So next meeting, we also have a joint meeting. So same day.
I don't think that's happening.
Okay, have all of those.
Yeah.
You still have some back.
Yes,
Yes.
we'll be at the middle school for next meeting. Do you have a list of joining meetings?
No.
I don't know how it happens.
I know,
it's
so-
in there. Alright, I
I
have
think you sent it out.
It was originally thinking about that day, but 2 weeks
Okay.
ago.
So delete it.
So
And the next one's definitely at the middle school.
the
Yes.
school committee meeting.
Yep, and then we'll start at town hall in December. On the 11th. Yes.
Anything else?
Can I just make a plug? I'm gonna make a plug for the C2 Foundation's Toy and Gift Card Drive. That they're putting together, so we have our staff working with families to identify those students in need. I think the really important thing to understand is this toy drive goes directly to students who are in our schools here in North. It's not a toy drive that goes out to, like Toys for Tots, which is a wonderful organization, but this actually goes right to students here in our schools and families. We're working with just not C2's kind of driving it, but we have Health and Youth Services, we have St. Paul, like there's a number of agencies, and we're part of that. So that toy drive is going to be going on. There's going to be, I think, it's the 23rd. They'll be out in front of the hay.
Yep.
But they also have drop boxes at all the schools and a number of the businesses. I won't read them all. I know it's gone out to staff. Yours, yep. Your Goat City, Alberto's, like the kind of the typical folks. But all of the ones out there, there's a lot of places folks can drop off in terms of toys. And then, like I said, we also do gift cards for high school age students, clothing, and then C2 will be working with some big donors who are looking to pick up entire families as well. So just wanted to get that out there. It's really nice thing. I sat in a meeting yesterday, and there's so many different, last week I should say, just so many different members of the community and different boards and different volunteers. So truly a community event, and anything we can do to support it. I know it's gone out and sent stuff out to staff. Going on in different ways.
They accept money donations. too.
Yes, they do. Absolutely, yeah.
I got 2 things. One, how are we at with the reinstating new positions for, not new positions, sorry.
All of our positions that were reinstated have been posted. The elementary specialists have almost all gone back to their previous FTE. We are working on library. We actually posted for a 0.4 librarian because Mrs. Dermis is currently a reading teacher in her other life at the other 0.4. So we posted for that, and we're doing some stuff there. I came to an agreement on Friday afternoon with the NTA around teacher leadership positions. We are going to push those back to July. January 2nd, which is when we come back from the winter break. And with pushing that back till January, we're able to bring back all of the roles instead of select, which is really great. So I'm going to share that with you guys, a lot of the rationale around it, especially because it's so focused around curriculum. At the elementary levels, we really had a lot of conversations about what made most sense. So we're able to do that. And we're also, part of that conversation was that they really would like to negotiate the roles and the stipends as part of our contract negotiations this year, which I actually think is a really great opportunity both for the teachers and for the administration. And so some of the principals and central office admin will sit on that working group with them, and that will be part of our revision for next year, which will be really great. And then we also posted for all those positions that was going to start in January. I know we have a bunch of interest in the art position at Norton Middle School. We're in conversations about the music position. So, we're hopeful that we'll have everybody back for January. Those are all been posted as well. Yeah. And as I mentioned last time, those were all long-term positions. I didn't want to be pulling teachers out of classrooms in the middle of the year. Just not what's good for kids. So.
What, was it, I don't want to call it a negotiation piece of it, but was it well received?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty happy.
Yeah, so and I think ultimately the back and forth with the NTA around the teacher leadership positions was just the duties of the role and how challenging, especially at the elementary level, how challenging it is to be a full-time teacher and also supporting curriculum and data for second and third grade. So, we were able to come to an agreement that I think both sides are really happy with. And, as you heard at our meeting at the Yale School earlier this year, just, you know, some of the challenges that, you know, exist without those positions. So, yeah.
And the last thing, just so the committee has it, tomorrow is our first ground rules meeting with the NTA, for negotiation purposes. So obviously those, that we negotiated in private, but it is our first meeting and we'll keep you updated as we go. That is it.
Are those, I know the NTA, those negotiations.
They're not. They are requesting, they'll have speaking representatives and they'll have silent representatives. So they will obviously, when we leave and everyone caucuses, they'll, you know, be engaged in the conversation, but they'll have, just one or two people that is speaking. for the team.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second. Not everyone at once.
All over. Thank you.